Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
This is what you do when you've just found that statement handbag on eBay and you want to build an entire wardrobe around it. You start selling to keep buying. Yep, on eBay. Over that all-black everything phase? List it and buy all the color. Feeling more vintage than ever? It's out with the new and in with the pre-loved. Next thing you know, you've refreshed your wardrobe basically without spending a dime. Yeah, eBay, the place to buy and sell new, pre-loved, vintage, and rare fashion.
I'm James McComb, reporting live from home in my bathrobe and slippers. Tonight, we're talking Dunkin' Polar Peppermint Coffee. Gene's here with the latest. Gene, do you copy?
The home with Dunkin' is where you want to be.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're detecting the undetectable. Using advanced AI technology, our experts can accurately detect signals in the human voice that are indicators of coronary artery disease. We're making more possible at Mayo Clinic because every day we're doing what's never been done. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic. You know where to go.
Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Matt Hanna.
We're Horror Hour with the Hannahs, a married couple who love digging into the guts of horror movies.
Literally and figuratively.
Whether it's new releases or cult classics, on our podcast we break down the scares, themes, and hidden messages with just the right amount of love and humor, with some occasional bickering.
So grab your popcorn and your emotional support blanket and join us Wednesdays
for a spooky good time with Horror Hour with the Hannahs.
Available wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe today, if you dare.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, Threads, and Facebook at Red Treehouse Pod. And now, you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. As always, if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. Important note: sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Located at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House is inarguably one of the most iconic landmarks in the United States. According to the National Archives, the White House receives approximately 6,000 visitors each day. A stunning work of art and architecture, it's near impossible to describe the immensity of the White House if you've never seen it in person. Pictures simply don't do it justice. The White House measures at 168 feet long, 152 feet wide, and 70 feet high, for an impressive 55,000 square feet. The White House sits on 18 acres of land in the center of Washington, D.C., and is divided into 3 main sections: the residence, the East Wing, and the West Wing. The residence is the main building where the President and First Lady live. The East Wing houses the offices for the First Lady and her staff, and the West Wing houses the President's office and those of his senior staff. In total, the White House has 132 rooms, including 16 guest bedrooms, 3 kitchens, and 35 bathrooms. It also has 412 doors, 147 windows, 28 fireplaces, 8 staircases, and 3 elevators. And the White House is also home to several ghosts who roam the property. In fact, the White House is considered one of the most haunted buildings in the United States. And with over 225 years of history since construction was finalized, it's the perfect location for restless spirits to terrify unsuspecting visitors and staff. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the ghosts of the White House. Which spirits stalk the hallways and rooms of America's most famous home? I'll share the stories. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. Constructed on October 13, 1792, the White House stands as the icon of Washington, D.C., a city filled with statues, memorials, and monuments. Less than a mile from the Washington Monument and a brisk 25-minute walk from the Capitol building, the White House is the embodiment of the nation's capital. 46 presidents, excluding George Washington, have called the White House home. And with an enduring and robust history, it makes good sense visitors from all over the world have claimed it to be haunted. In the 19th and 20th centuries, spiritualism, the belief that spirits of the dead can communicate with the living, was growing in popularity. Attempts to communicate with the dead go back to ancient times, where people from all walks of life sought to contact deceased loved ones by way of a spirit medium. In the mid-19th century, spiritualism picked up steam, when the Fox sisters demonstrated their uncanny abilities to commune with the dead. Because death affects us all, the question of can we communicate with the dead fascinated everyone from the average citizen to the First Lady. According to a story published by the Washington Post on Halloween Eve 2017, President Harry S. Truman went to bed at his usual time of 9 p.m., when a few hours later, he heard repeated knocking on his bedroom door. In a letter written to his wife, he noted, quote, "I jumped up and put on my bathrobe, opened the door, and no one was there. Went out and looked up and down the hall, looked in your room and Margie's. Still, no one. Went back to bed after locking the doors, and there were footsteps in your room whose door I'd left open. Jumped and looked, and no one there. The damned place is haunted sure as shootin'. Secret Service said not even a watchman was up here at that hour. You and Margie had better come back and protect me before some of these ghosts carry me off." End quote. Despite Truman's apparent fear, the specter is still unknown. Other ghosts reported to haunt the White House include the third U.S. President, Thomas Jefferson, who has been heard playing his violin in the Yellow Oval Room, the seventh U.S. President, Andrew Jackson, who is most frequently seen lying in his bed in the Rose Room and can be heard laughing throughout the White House. Abigail Adams, the First Lady of second U.S. President John Quincy Adams, quote, hung laundry in the East Room, and contemporary staff can smell wet laundry and the scent of lavender, end quote. Also, the 9th U.S. President, William Henry Harrison, is believed to haunt the attic of the White House, and he has the double dubious distinction of holding the office of president for the least amount of time, 31 days, and being the first president to die in the White House. While occupying the home, 18th U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant reported hearing a ghost at night, which was described as, quote, the ghost of an old man haunting the second-floor bedrooms, an aged and bent man with long, phosphorescent, white beard and hair, ghastly and wavy, bright and glaring eyes, and long, scrawny fingers. His walk is noiseless but stately, and his presence is always indicated by a peculiar electric sensation which pervades the surrounding air, end quote. In 1911, Major Archibald Butt, the military aide to President William Howard Taft, wrote a letter to his sister where he described a ghost he called the Thing. Quote, it seems that the White House is haunted. The ghost, it seems, is a young boy. From its description, I should think about 14 or 15 years old. They say that the first knowledge one has of the presence of the Thing is a slight pressure on the shoulder, as if someone were leaning over your shoulder to see what you might be doing, end quote. For his part, President Taft was enraged by the discussion about the ghost boy and ordered anyone fired who told stories about the spirit. Others have reported seeing a ghost of a man named David Burns. Though not a political figure, Burns was the original owner of the land that the White House was built on. Some have reported seeing his spirit in the Yellow Oval Room. Others have heard him walking and laughing in hallways throughout the building and the surrounding property. In 1897, a policeman was walking the grounds of the White House when he saw a light coming from the greenhouse complex on the west side of the building. Concerned about an intruder, the officer went to investigate, where he, quote, was met by a tall, beautiful lady dressed in the fashion of the early 19th century, end quote. He called out to her, but she quickly vanished, and despite searching, there was no trace of her. A few weeks later, he saw the same light at the greenhouse complex, and this time, as he stepped into the conservatory, quote, he felt a rush of air and a touch on his shoulder. He turned to see the same lady as before, and gripped by fear, passed out, end quote. While these ghost sightings are numerous and scary, we've not yet discussed the most famous White House ghost and haunting, the 16th U.S. President, Abraham Lincoln. Sometime in 1862, during Abraham Lincoln's presidency, his wife, Mary, began hosting seances and participating in spirit circles in the Red Room at the White House. She was grieving the death of her son Willie and was desperate to commune with him. Willie's death was especially tragic, as he passed away from typhoid fever at the age of 11 in February 1862. According to the White House Historical Association, quote, there is evidence to suggest that she hosted as many as 8 seances in the White House, and that her husband was even in attendance for a few of them. The seances proved to be such an effective coping mechanism for Mrs. Lincoln that she once remarked to her half-sister that Willie lives. He comes to me every night and stands at the foot of the bed with the same sweet, adorable smile that he always has had. He does not always come alone. Little Eddie, her son that perished at the age of 4, is sometimes with him." End quote. Mary Todd Lincoln experienced an unbelievable amount of loss in her life, with none arguably as awful as the assassination of her husband on April 15, 1865. The night before his murder, President Lincoln was attending a performance of the comedy Our American Cousin at the Ford's Theater with his wife, Major Henry Rathbone, and his fiancée, Clara Harris. Earlier that morning, John Wilkes Booth, an actor and Confederate sympathizer, learned President Lincoln would be attending the performance. Motivated by a desire to see the Confederacy return to glory, Booth conspired with several others to kidnap Lincoln, but ultimately decided to murder him, along with Vice President Andrew Jackson and Secretary of State William H. Seward. At around 10:15 p.m., as a specific line in the play was delivered, and as the audience erupted in laughter, Booth opened the door to the presidential box where the Lincolns and their guests were sitting, and shot him in the head at point-blank range with a Derringer pistol. The bullet entered Lincoln's left ear and came to rest near the front of his skull. Dr. Charles Leal rushed upstairs and found the president paralyzed and barely breathing. He was taken across the street to a boarding house. 9 hours later, at 7:22 a.m. on April 15, President Lincoln was pronounced dead. Inarguably, President Abraham Lincoln is the most well-known ghost of the White House and has been seen in the Lincoln bedroom and the Yellow Oval Room. First Lady Grace Coolidge, wife of the 30th U.S. President Calvin Coolidge, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and the 26th U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt all claim to have seen Lincoln's ghost in the White House. Some claim to have seen him standing at a window looking out. Others reported hearing footsteps and knocking on a bedroom door. Still others have claimed to see Lincoln standing by a fireplace. And many others have reported feeling his presence while in the White House, even if they did not see his spirit. Something interesting and unsettling. In 1872, famed photographer William Mumler took a picture of Mary Todd Lincoln. In the photo, she is seated and dressed in what appears to be a black robe with a hood. Behind her, as if standing over his widow, is the shadowy image of Abraham Lincoln, with his hands resting on her shoulders. The famous photo is widely considered to be a hoax, though the method Mumler used to create the picture is still unproven. Though I've always lived within a 3 to 4 hour drive of Washington, D.C., I've never actually visited the White House. In fact, I wrote this episode just a half-mile walk from the White House steps. I think it may be one of those things where you live nearby, so you take it for granted. A confession. I grew up in and around New York City until I graduated from high school, and I've only been to the Statue of Liberty once. There's something about an old-fashioned haunting that I really love. Unlike some of the stories of demonic infestation and possession, hearing stories of ghosts walking down hallways and standing in a room still creeps me out, but not in a terrified, run for your life kind of way. I have to believe the White House is haunted, if only because it makes sense given the building's 225-year history. I'm sure in the years to come, I'll take a tour of the White House, and I can only hope to not only take in the beauty of the building and surrounding area, and to learn its history, but also to catch a glimpse of something unusual, maybe even the ghost of Abe Lincoln himself. Have you had a scary experience at the White House? If so, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com and I'll feature your story in an upcoming episode. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with these lingering questions. Is the White House really haunted? And if so, which spirits stalk the hallways and rooms of America's most famous home? I've shared the stories. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.